it's Seraphina. Tonight I have a story that's a little different from what I usually share. A tale that's not just personal, but also filled with a sense of mystery and fear. This is about a strange series of events that happened to someone close to my family, something we never quite understood, and something that left us with more questions than answers. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to subscribe and follow if you haven't already. I love sharing these reflective and mysterious stories with you, and your support means so much to me. Let's take a deep breath, settle in, and begin this unsettling tale of strange occurrences and chilling mysteries. This story is about my uncle, Ron. Uncle Ron was never one to believe in mysteries or coincidences. He was the practical one in the family, always laughing off ghost stories and debunking superstitions. But that changed when he moved to a quiet town out west. He had taken a job as a journalist, and while the work was straightforward enough, it was the events outside of work that started to feel off. The town was small, nestled in the hills, and surrounded by thick woods. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and where strangers stood out. Uncle Ron was excited about the move, looking forward to a slower pace of life. But within a few weeks, something strange happened. He received an anonymous letter. The letter was simple, but cryptic. It was typed in a font that looked like an old typewriter, the edges of the paper slightly frayed. The letter didn't have a name, only a strange message. Look to the stars, for they reveal more than you think. At first, Uncle Ron thought it was a joke, maybe a welcome prank from a colleague at the newspaper. He laughed it off, thinking nothing of it. But then, a few days later, he found a second note tucked under the windshield wiper of his car. This one was different. The message was shorter, but somehow more unsettling. They see what you don't. There was no explanation, no clue as to who might have left it. Uncle Ron tried to brush it off, but he couldn't help feeling a chill run down his spine. It was the first time I had ever heard him sound worried. Then things took an even stranger turn. Over the next few weeks, Uncle Ron started noticing someone watching him. It was always just out of the corner of his eye, a shadow disappearing behind a tree, a figure standing on a distant hill, just barely visible through the mist. At first, he thought it was his imagination, the result of the strange notes and the isolation of the new town. But then it became more frequent, more tangible. One night, as he was walking home from work, he saw someone standing across the street, watching him. The figure was cloaked in shadows, their face obscured, but he could feel their gaze fixed on him. He called out, asking who they were, but there was no response. Just silence, thick and unsettling. The figure turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving him feeling like he was being hunted. Uncle Ron became increasingly paranoid. He started locking his doors and windows, even during the day. He began to notice small things around his house. Papers out of place, windows he was sure he'd closed left open. One night, he found another note taped to his door, this one even stranger than the last. It simply read, "You're getting closer. Keep looking." This note was followed by a series of strange occurrences. His phone would ring in the middle of the night, and when he answered, there would be nothing but silence on the other end. Lights would flicker in his house, and sometimes he'd hear faint footsteps outside his window. He called the police, but they found no evidence of anyone lurking around his home. It was then that Uncle Ron started to wonder if he was dealing with something more sinister than a prank. Things escalated when he discovered the symbols. One morning, he woke up to find strange symbols etched into the dirt outside his front door. They were shapes he didn't recognize, almost like constellations, and they made him feel a deep, unsettling dread. He took photos of the symbols and tried researching them, but he found nothing that made any sense. He showed the photos to a few locals, hoping someone might recognize the symbols, but they only shrugged and exchanged uneasy glances. One older woman pulled him aside and whispered, "You should leave those symbols alone. Some things aren't meant to be understood." Uncle Ron was taken aback, but her words lingered in his mind. For the first time, he considered leaving the town, but Uncle Ron was determined to get to the bottom of it. He wasn't one to back down from a mystery, no matter how unsettling it was. So he started looking into the town's history, hoping to find some answers. What he found was a string of unsolved incidents spanning decades. Each one was eerily similar. A person would receive strange messages. Symbols would appear near their home, and then one day they would disappear without a trace. There were no explanations, no suspects, only a lingering fear that had settled over the town like a fog. When Uncle Ron shared his findings with me over the phone, his voice was laced with anxiety. I could hear the strain in his voice, the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. He confessed that he had started to feel like he was being watched constantly, as though someone or something was keeping track of his every move. Then came the final message. One evening, he found another note on his doorstep. This one was different from the others. It was longer, more personal. It said, "Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Walk away, or you'll be lost like the others." That note shook him to his core. He could no longer pretend that this was just a prank or a coincidence. The messages, the figures in the shadows, the symbols, they all pointed to something dark, something that went beyond rational explanation. That night, he packed a bag and decided to leave the town. He couldn't explain it, but he felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though staying even one more night would seal his fate. Uncle Ron left without telling anyone where he was going. He drove through the night, finally stopping at a motel miles away, exhausted but relieved to be gone. Over the next few weeks, he never returned to the town, and he never spoke about what happened there again. He moved back closer to family, and while he returned to his normal, skeptical self, there was something different about him. A quiet, haunted look in his eyes, as though he had seen something he couldn't unsee. He tried to put the experience behind him, but every now and then he would look over his shoulder or flinch at the sound of an unexpected knock at the door. It was as if a part of him had been forever marked by that town, by the mysteries he would never fully understand. Take a deep breath in and
Must have seen them because he took off running through the park.
Thank you for joining
As far as
me
I know,
tonight
he didn't
and
get
for
caught.
listening to Uncle Ron's
My
story.
mom got home a few minutes after the
It's a
police
reminder
arrived
that
and they
there are
explained what
mysteries in
happened.
life that defy
We ended up getting new
explanation,
locks on the doors and
things that
windows
linger
just to
in
feel
the
safer,
shadows,
and that was the last
watching
time I
and
walked
waiting.
home from work by myself.
Sometimes
Thankfully, my car
it's
was
best
ready
to
for me
walk
the next
away,
day.
to leave the unknown where it belongs, and to trust our instincts when they tell us that something isn't right. Until next time, sweet dreams, lovely friend.